And I said, please, God, if you're listening, please. I know I'm not worth anything. I know I'm disgusting and vile, and I am nothing good. But please, Jesus, please, let me come into my soul, come into my life. Help.
Remember when I shared this clip from my interview with Father Martins recently? If you don't mind, I'd like to share it with you again, because what the good Father shared with us during that interview is so highly relevant to what this man went through before.
So trauma, I'm talking about severe trauma, and it doesn't bring the demons inside of us automatically. Trauma is not a covenant with evil, but what's dangerous about trauma is it distorts our view of reality. It distorts our perception of the truth and causes us to believe a lie. And so when we are abused, when we witness an accident or some tragedy, we can come to a point where we believe false things about reality through that. So in the case of abuse, that I'm unworthy, that I'm unlovable, that I'm dirty, that I'm an object to be abused. In the case of an accident, that there's no happy ending in human life. Like there's no joy, there's no grace. There's tragedy. That death is more powerful than God. That even God can't reverse the evil that was done in the course of, say, an accident. So that's trauma. And then there's three species of sin. So personal sin, right? So that's a direct covenant with evil. What I call generational sin or generational curses. All sin is a covenant with evil. However, some is so visceral that it can bring about an imitation of a pattern through the family line and down the generations, such that there is a particular imitation of a sin, such as alcoholism, or some families that I've encountered, that no man ever lives beyond 52 years old. Now, you can say, hey, that's just a medical problem. That's a genetic thing. It might be, but that doesn't change the point. That genetic problem might be the existence of a generational curse. And so we pray against those things. And my goodness, when we identify patterns of dysfunction that are through the generations, we need to pray into them because there might be a generational curse there. And my God, I have seen just a wonderful transition and a wonderful glory that has happened through such prayer, that where like the quality of life for families have just changed tremendously. And the third type of sin is what I call transferred sin. So curses, hexes, spells, that evil that is willed upon another. Right. So those are the ways by which people become possessed, right? So if you're possessed, you've got those things happening, at least one of them. So, but the common doorways, individual doorways, occult involvement, sexual sin, persistent grave sin, no matter what it is, cursing others, committing sacrilege, refusing to forgive others, rebelling against God, his will, against his church, mockery, just giving into rage and letting our own rage just pour itself out. So obviously from those things, we need freedom. And freedom comes from, different things. So for example, if it's trauma, you need help processing the trauma. You might need to see a therapist. Therapists are trained to help people process the trauma. Your childhood may keep having recurring influence on you in a profoundly negative way. You might need a therapist's help to get to the bottom of that. And they can help with that. And if it's sin, well, confession, Eucharist, prayer. If it's a curse, like transferred sin or a generational curse, my God, you pray. We have to pray to mitigate it. We have to make sacrifices. We have to fast. We have to make penance. We have to renounce sin. We have to grow in virtue. So, you know, the process of liberation is exactly that. It's a process, and it can take a long time. But we shouldn't get discouraged over that, because it is a work that, that when it takes long, well, it takes long because it's such important work, and the structure that you're setting up is a powerful structure, and so allow it to go at the pace that the Lord wants, even though heavens, it may not be going as fast as you desire, but as long as you're pursuing it, that's okay. Leave the rest up to God.
And now, if you have the time, with what Father Martin's just shared with us in that clip, try and listen to this.
How I first got interested actually in the occult is my mom would have books that she would be reading on her nightstand. And I took an interest in these books. And one was the Amityville Horror. One was Helter Skelter about Charlie Manson. And the other one was The Exorcist, the movie, The Exorcist. And that reading those books really, my mother wasn't around. I would just go in, take a book, bring it into my bedroom or put it in a backpack or something and go outside and go into my fort and read it and just have the life scared right out of me. But it interested me, this dark side, for some reason. So that was like my first taste of it. So I had a lot of darkness in my life from early on. Um, it was shortly after that I discovered my older brother's hardcore porn collection, and I got involved with looking at that and reading, and it just that rots your brain, and it destroys the way you look at relationships. And I was so young at the time. I mean, I was sexually active by the time I was 13 years old with an older girl from school. I really began to go downhill around the age of 13. My mother, I don't know why, she bought me a Ouija board. And I was reading these books, and I was trying to take things out of the library about witchcraft and demonology at that time. And this one particular day, I had the Ouija board. One of my older brothers had a ceramic skull that looked real, and I took the skull, and I took the skull, and I got a candle, and I went in, and I had a knife, and I shut off all the lights in my bedroom, and I cut myself on the finger with a knife, and I let the blood drip onto the board. This was like my first time doing a blood ritual, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So something came through on the board. Usually it takes two people to do it, to hold the planchette and move it. But with me, it only took one. And the planchette wasn't moving like just this way and this way. It was spinning around. Like I would have to hold it. It wouldn't do it on its own. I would have to hold it. And it would spin around and do these grand designs and spell out things. And it was amazing to watch this as this was happening. And of course, I should have I should have been smarter and known that what I was reaching and what I was dealing with was very, very dangerous, and very old. And that was the start of something incredibly evil, which would follow me for the rest of my life. And it did. And it made my life a living hell. And then I began to have an interest in the occult through some music that I was listening to. My sister and my older brothers had introduced me to a lot of metal, and there was a lot of themes. So a few of these bands had a lot of themes with the occult and Theban script. And what Theban script is they call it the witch's alphabet. And I was learning about Theban script, and I was learning how to read it, and I was learning how to write it. At this time, I began to have episodes of sleep paralysis. And for people who don't know what sleep paralysis is that you can see something, but you're laying in bed and you're paralyzed. You can't move, you can't scream, but you see whatever is on the side of your bed or in your bedroom. And I had my first episodes of sleep paralysis pretty early on in life. I was still a teenager, and I remember it would look like a hooded figure standing next to the bed. It would be blacker than black, like it would be dark in the room, and this would be darker than the blackness in the room at night. And one time, I remember uh, one had red eyes, and I would absolutely be terrified, and I'd be trying to scream and scream and scream, and I wouldn't be able to. And then finally, something would happen, and I'd be able to wake up gasping, and it was just like it was terrifying. It was terrifying. You knew that it was very old. It was a very old evil. You could tell. You just there was this feeling. There was this vibration in the air almost that it was just absolutely pure evil. I then had an episode where I came home from school one day and I was tired, and I went in my bedroom to take a nap. And thought I fell into a dream. Maybe I did. I fell into a dream where um, there was a dark entity in the room with me, and it brought me up to the ceiling, where the ceiling would be like this, and my face was like right there, and it started to spin me, and I was like this close from the ceiling, and it was spinning me around very, 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 very slowly, and it started to get a little bit quicker at the time. Um, and then this thing, uh, or like I said, it was a dream or an incubus or whatnot, started to uh, started to have sex with me, and it was absolutely horrifying. And then there was a knock at the door, and I felt like I fell onto the bed. There was a crash. My mother opened the door and she goes, "What's going on in here? What was that? What was that loud sound?" And uh, to this day, I mean, my mother heard a sound, and I felt like I felt like I crashed onto the bed. And to this day, there's a part of me that thinks that really actually happened. I was hanging out in a cemetery, one of the most notorious cemeteries around in the Northeast, and it was one of the gates of hell, they called it back in the day. And I remember my mom reading a story about this that had come out in the newspaper one Halloween, and I always wanted to go there. And I was now old enough. I got better. I was fine. I started hanging around in this cemetery at night. I was doing black magic spells. I was using a demon by the name of Lucifage Raphakal. Um, I was doing blood rituals where I would cut myself and smear blood all over my body. And I would do this at night in the cemetery, as well as doing these black magic spells. Um, I began listening to a lot of what they call Norwegian black metal. And I was listening to bands like Mayhem, Gorgoroth, and Burzum. Um, Gorgoroth is absolutely horribly satanic. And I was listening to a lot of satanic music. Um, I considered myself a Satanist at the time. I thought that there was something in that for me. I felt like I was taking back my power. So uh, I wound up meeting my ex-wife, And I moved down into Pennsylvania. And I was practicing witchcraft. She was practicing witchcraft. And we were in this old house where miners lived in. They had some old mines up around there. And the house seemed pretty innocuous. And one night, it started where she said, "Wake up, wake up. We're in bed, sleeping. Wake up. Listen, do you hear that?" I'm like, "I don't hear anything." And she goes, "There's footsteps coming up and down the stairs." And I said, "I'll go out and check it out." I got up out of bed. I went down through the house. Nothing. Didn't find anything. I told her, I said, "You must have been imagining it." She was like, "I was not imagining it. It was heavy footsteps." And I said, "Well, the only other person in the house is your son, and he's only like 4 years old, so it wouldn't be him." So the next day, I was upstairs and I heard this massive crash downstairs. And it sounded like she had done the dishes, stacked them up on the counter, the kitchen counter, and like condensation got underneath and they slid and they crashed. And I ran down expecting to find this big mess, and there was nothing. Nothing. Okay. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm imagining things now. So she had a job where we kind of worked opposite shifts, but if one of us came home early, there was this garage downstairs, and it wasn't, you had to manually like lift the garage door in order to come in. And I was home one day and I heard the garage door come home, and I said, "Wow, she must have come home early." And I opened the door to the basement and went down because the basement was the garage, and the door was closed. Strange, very strange, you know, very strange. And then I was at work one day, and she said she heard the same thing and thought I was home early. So at this point, we're hearing things and whatnot, and we can't piece anything together really. And she, at this point, is just really hardcore into the witchcraft, and she's doing black magic spells and whatnot. She's really putting it out there, and I was too. And another night comes, and she wakes me up. She says, "Wake up, wake up, wake up! Listen, listen, listen." This time I hear it. This time I hear the footsteps up and down, and they're loud. I grabbed something for a weapon. I don't remember what it was. I expected to go down those stairs face to face with somebody and get into some kind of altercation. But I walked through that house and there was nothing. This is when we really started to believe we had conjured something up, or maybe there was something in that house before that we didn't know about. And we certainly weren't helping the situation. So a few nights later, and I mean, you got to keep in mind now, this is like in August and it's very hot. We didn't have an air conditioner in the room. And we wake up, I do, and I wake her up, and it's very, very cold in this room. Very cold. And in the corner, you can hear this. It's like a snipping sound, like a tick, tick, tick. And it was in the corner. And I got up and I was like, what is going on? And I opened the door to the bedroom, and the rest of the house is hot. So that was that. At this point, we stopped doing anything. The final straw came when we were in bed one night, and we hear this sound downstairs, and you hear like it's a continuous scratching. And I said, "What is that?" And she says, "I don't know." And I said, "I'm not going down to find out." So it was like the next day, we were out on the porch, out on the front porch, and we were having a couple of beers, just sitting outside, talking to the neighbor. And for some reason, I went around to the front door. And on the front door were these marks that looked like somebody with nails just kept scratching at the door. That was enough. We packed up and we started to move right away. The landlord was called by a neighbor, a concerned neighbor, and the landlord came down and goes, "What are you doing? You're trying to move out? What's going on?" And my ex-wife said, "You didn't tell us the house was haunted." And the landlord said nothing, got back in the truck, and left. And we moved. Like 3 days later, we moved.
The two of them later got a divorce, and he married another woman who also practiced witchcraft. And things got so bad again that the wife finally did this.
She started to not really do the witchcraft anymore. She wasn't doing the spells. And I had pretty much stopped as well. But I had my altar in a box down in the basement where I had put all the tools for my altar. And we started to hear things in this house. You'd be in the living room, and across the house in the kitchen, it would be dark, and you'd see blacker than black things moving along. You'd hear keys jingle. You'd hear jackets move on the coat hanger. You would hear all these little sounds, and then they started to get worse and worse. And you look into the darkness, and it is terrifying. My wife would be working at night, and I would be home alone. And it was absolutely terrifying. Completely, absolutely. Just your blood ran cold looking into that darkness because you knew, you could tell, like I said, by vibration, like I said earlier, that there was something very old and very evil. And I believe it was Raphael. So, Chris starts to read the Bible. It's my wife, Chris. She starts praying to God. And she starts praying to God to save me. And I became so ill. I was so sick. This thing was consuming me. I had another episode of sleep paralysis where I was paralyzed, but I saw them. And there were two of them on the side of the bed. They were monstrous looking, hideous. And there was a small one, like a kid, up on the bed with the most evil face whispering things to my ears. And I become so ill. And I keep going back to the hospital, and they don't get it. They don't understand it. I can't even get up off of the couch. I become so ill. My friend's a doctor. He came one night and looked at me, and just the color disappeared out of him, and back to the hospital. And then the animals, we'd wake up and they'd be huddling in the corners of the house, shaking. Something really bad was going on in that house. I could hardly walk. I woke up one day And I had this guinea pig named Bromley, who I absolutely loved, and he was laying in his cage dead. The other guinea pig was hiding, huddled. The dog was hiding. I was dying. And finally, I was in the bathroom. Uh, I couldn't walk. I laid down and I said, please, God, if you're listening, please. I know I'm not worth anything. I know I'm disgusting and vile. And I am nothing good. But please, Jesus, please, let me come into my soul. Come into my life. Help. And I remember there was this feeling that came through me. And it was like a feeling of hope. Laying on the floor. And I almost feel like it's a hand that reaches on my shoulder and picks me up. And off. And I went to bed. And I woke up. And I started feeling better. I went down to that side of the house, still ill, and feeling better. And I screamed at the top of my lungs, you and I are mortal enemies. I hate you. I want nothing to do with you. And I will spend the rest of my life telling people about Jesus Christ and the Lord. I will spend the rest of my life turning people to God. I will be telling them of the gospel. I'll be sharing the good news. But you will never, ever have me again. Two days later, I went through just a huge recovery. Everything in the house stopped. I would go out and I'd look at the garage. Because for so long, I planned to take my life there. I just look at what I became. This is no way to live. It leads you to complete destruction.
If you'd like to listen to the full interview, there's a link in the description box below. And as always, thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time to be here with us, and I hope all of you have learned something useful from this video.